Next up on the show, another returning guest to talk about what you could call, I suppose, the secondary feature on Saturday, the Grade 2 Canadian Stakes. Welcome back to the show, Ashley Mailloux. Ashley, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Things are good. I'm really psyched for this Queen's Plate. And, Woodbine have been a really good partner for us the last couple of years. And it's great to see them have this weekend where I think they're really going to have a chance to shine. And I think it's a cool card. I think it's really interesting. And I definitely wanted some help and wanted to reach out to you to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this Grade 2 Canadian Stakes. I figure we can talk through some of the key contenders, and we'll have to lead off with the morning line favorite, who I keep coming back to in this spot, despite the very long layoff. Talking, of course, about number 10, Cambria Park. This is a filly who had the success at the Grade 1 level last year, showed versatility, which I love, coming from out of it, being on the lead, and just a filly who presumably, and the recent work suggests this might be possible, has improved since the last time we've seen her on the racetrack. I don't love betting horses who are favorites off a nearly year-long layoff, but I just keep coming back here. What are your feelings about Cambria Park as we look into this Grade 2 Canadian on Saturday?
When you see a horse off a long layoff like that, I mean, it's nearly a year, right? 11 months. It is always concerning. And then when you see it's Chad Brown, it becomes, I don't know, half a concern in my opinion.
Yes.
We just saw this recently in at Monmouth Park. I've been doing the expert picks there for Twin Spires, and he had a horse, I think, closer to 2-year layoff. And I believe she ran second or third. And you're like looking there and you're like, I don't know how I feel about this. You're like, it's Chad Brown though. It gives you a little bit more confidence. And I think with her, she's a 4-year-old filly, and she's really done nothing wrong. Looking at her stats, I mean, she's a 5-time winner. And I think the thing that you hit on, Pete, is that she's done it kind of all over the place. She's been on the front end. That's what she did last time at Keeneland. She took him kind of gate to wire fashion and still won by a length under Johnny V. But typically she comes from out of it. So I think having those options is good for her. And you see who's going to ride her. Rafael Hernandez. I mean, it's hard not to endorse her. I mean, obviously the price is going to be short, 6-5. Hopefully she'll stay at that. I do think because it is a bigger field and just the layoff that she will be around that. She might even float up. But we know everyone's going to bet Chad. It's Chad off the long layoffs. The concern is less, and it's a graded stakes. I mean, it's hard to ignore.
Who do you think the main danger is to Cambria Park here?
I was torn. I mean, I did like Theodore B a little bit. I thought last time out it was a really big performance in the Dance Smartly. And I think if you liked her, you'd probably look to Elizabeth Way. But a horse that actually has kind of disappointed me in the last two, and this is like her final, I guess, try that I'm going to put her on a ticket, is I really like Amalfi Coast. I think kind of looking at her 2 starts back, she won a mile on the turf. She was still closing to miss by 2 1/4, and kind of looking at how the trip pans out, she's always looking for ground. So at the mile, it wasn't enough. Then last time out, they actually put her on the Tapeta and they cut her back to 7/8. And once again, she was kind of making ground up late, and then she actually stalled a little bit. And that's what it says. I mean, it wasn't the best performance from her, but I have to think kind of at this distance, at 1.125 miles on the turf is probably where I'd like to see her race. I mean, the distance at that point shouldn't be the problem. It's just going to be, can she compete at this level? She is facing some tough competition. So for me, she's going to offer value. I mean, she's 6-1 morning line. That was a great price on her.
Yeah, that certainly is square when you look at the best work that she's put forth in her 11-start career. What about the pace in here, Ashley? How do you see it playing out? I was thinking that Cambria Park might be sort of in between where we've seen her in the last couple of runs, but certainly I don't really feel like she's going to be on the lead. Just looking at pace figures, it seems like there's a bunch who will be in front of her, but this is a spot where I'm definitely sympathetic to the Amalfi Coast idea. Obviously, I need Cambria Park, but I want somebody who's maybe going to be positioned in front of those two as well. I'm just not sure who that's going to be. How do you see the pace playing out?
It's kind of interesting because when you go through the field, and I'm just skimming through the past performances we talk, I mean, you look at horses like Another Time, the 5, who has made the lead or been really close to it. And you can kind of see that race 3 starts back. I mean, they're going a mile on a turf in the Nassau, Grade 2. They still went 46-4 to the half. They were still cooking. It was very fast off the opening quarter to get a half like that. This was a horse that almost took them kind of on the front end by neck. So hasn't been able to make the lead in the last 2. And I think last time out, they just went much faster. And at that distance, probably not the surface either that she wants to be on. So she's potentially going to be out there. I think Elizabeth Way is not going to be too far out of it. I don't think that she prefers that. I mean, when kind of look at her race at Gulfstream Park, she's won on front end fashion and she's been able to close. But when you look at that race on March 28th in the Orchid, she really wasn't making that move that she has in the past. So looking at her performances there up at Woodbine, I think she's going to be towards the front. I don't know if Emma's going to put her on the front. It's hard to say, but you can kind of go through here. And it is a little tricky, I think, just looking at the times and the past performances to really decide what the pace scenario is going to be, especially at this distance. Now, another one, who's shown some speed, Bold Script has gotten to the front before. I don't think against this group that Bold Script will be on the front. I don't think can kind of hang with these ones, but I don't know. How do you kind of see it shaping up?
I like your case for another time. I feel like the Nassau might be the key form line to look at. With it was a fast pace that day looking at the clock. But it's interesting, on the Timeform US figures anyway, was coded neutrally, and Elizabeth Way ends up getting the better of another time that day. Maybe that's the key. If the pace does hold together, if for some reason Cambria Park gets hung out, if Amalfi Coast isn't the same as she once was, maybe there's a nice little Elizabeth Way as the best of speed case to be made in this spot, coming out of that race in the Dance Smartly, which wasn't overly visually impressive or anything, but did have a trip excuse and does have some interesting back class. How you think Elizabeth Way can maybe pull off the upset in this spot for the master Roger Atfield?
I think she could. I really liked her, looking at her races at Gulfstream Park this winter. I think they had high hopes for her because when she came over here, she was already ready to roll. You always wonder about these horses in their first North American start, how they're going to fare, because even some of the trainers that are more notorious for having them ready to roll, their win percentage isn't even that high. They're just more likely than others. And it's always a tall task. So I think the way that she handled it, she won 2 races in a row. One of them was a grade 3. Then, like I said, in the Orchid, the grade 3 in her third start, she also faced really tough mares. Mean Mary is no joke. I mean, she's such a good horse in the Grand Motion barn. And so to finish third behind her, I think that's still a great effort and nothing to knock on this filly at all. I was disappointed with her last time. I just didn't see that late kick or anything really in the stretch. She kind of just rallied some, but not enough. It just wasn't what I was expecting from her. I really loved her in that spot, but that was going 1.25 miles. Now we're going 1.125 miles. I just think the setup might be slightly different for her. So yeah, I think she's the upset material. She'd be one that I would definitely think could get the way and beat Chad's horse, just also being fitter than Chad's horse at this point, at least from a race perspective.
Let's pause on Theodore B. We were talking off air about how this one is also cross-entered for Kentucky Downs on Sunday. I'm stealing your info because you were the one who told me that. But if she does decide to go here, do you think she can have a say?
I do. I don't necessarily think last time out going 1.25 miles, they went pedestrian. I don't think I see her necessarily being on the lead. I mean, she does have the rail and you don't know. She's made the lead in the past and they've gone faster, but typically it's when they go really slow and she makes it to the front and kind of has things go her way. Her race in the Trillium, though, I mean, that was on the Tapeta. It wasn't a good performance at all. And she actually took a lot of play in there, but looking at her on the turf, I think those are the performances that stick out. I mean, all 5 of her wins have come over the turf. She's actually quite the nice mare, and kind of seeing who she's faced in the past. She's had some good races and graded stakes. So I would use her. I just don't think necessarily her last race is the trip that I see her getting here.
While we're talking about the Dance Smartly, and we've already talked about a couple of the runners coming out of there, but Art of Almost, I think, is worth mentioning, at least for vertical players, as a potentially interesting long shot who was maybe a little bit against the flow last time in the Dance Smartly, came widest of all, only beaten 3 lengths for everything. Do you think Art of Almost is worth a look, more for underneath, but as a price to maybe mix in with some of the logicals?
Yeah, I actually think in terms of exotics, like a try here specifically, or maybe if you're looking at a superfecta, there are value horses in here. I don't necessarily see it kind of chalk out, as we'd say. I think kind of looking at Art of Almost, this is like the sleeper Roger Atfield horse in the field. I think I agree completely with you last time out that just trip was not going to work, and was 5-1 that day, was still respected on the tote board, but the way that race set up for her, it just wasn't going to pan out. And I think even her race before that, she just had to really chase throughout, and she wasn't close to it. And I kind of want to draw a line, especially through race 2 back. But you see her turf race where she won 3 starts back. forwardly placed, just a length or two off the leaders. It set up pretty nice for her, and the pace was fine to go into, and she got the job done by a neck. But looking at her last year, I mean, she still has looking at her last year in the Dan Smartly, I mean, she was third in that race. Then they actually sent her to Arlington Park at 1.125 miles, so today's distance. And I thought that was a huge race from her because she was dead last early on and had a ton of work to do late. She only missed by 2.25, and she did face good horses that day as well. So I wonder, too, if she's just needed some races to get back into form. And kind of looking at her, I don't really love her on the Tapeta. So I think she did win on the Tapeta and she broke her maiden on it, but I think she's more of a turf filly in my opinion. So maybe depending what the pace scenario comes up, hopefully she won't get a similar situation as last time where she's in a position where it's just not going to work for her. But I would use her. I mean, she's anywhere near 15-1. I don't see why she couldn't get third or fourth. I mean, she did that last time out and she faced several fillies in this field.
Yeah, on form, she makes sense. And at 10-1 or higher, which I'm pretty sure we are going to get, that's the long shot I'm interested in. I'll have plenty of Cambria Park, and I definitely see backing up, depending on what I'm doing in the races around this. I liked your case for Amalfi Coast, and I definitely like Elizabeth Way. If you held my feet to the fire for numbers, I'd probably call it 10-3-9. Any other wagering thoughts on this one before I ask you quickly about the rest of this card?
No, for me, I think the 3 and the 10 stood out. I obviously like the 6 as well. Theodore B is just a head scratcher. I'm just concerned too about the price that she's going to offer, 5-1, just based off that win. Yes, she won the Dan Smartly, but everything went her way. I'm not keen on that, but I have to think personally, Chad's horse is going to be favored, and then I think Elizabeth Way is going to be second choice. I think that's going to be pretty clear just based on their performances.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes absolute sense. We'll see. I still think hopefully there'll be an opportunity to eke out some value in the picks around this one. How about the rest of this card? Is there another place in particular you're excited to be wagering?
I mean, I feel biased for saying this in general. Obviously, I love the Queen's Plate. It's just a special race for the Canadian Triple Crown, and then it'll be exciting, especially for me, just to see who's going to go to 40 next for the Prince of Wales, if we'll see the winner go. Sometimes they go, sometimes they don't. It's kind of like we've seen recently in the last 2 years in the Kentucky Derby, where they don't necessarily go to the Preakness. But the horse that I like the most, I'll say, in the Queen's Plate, I really like Steve Asmussen's horse, Halo Again. I'm really excited about this one, and I have a feeling that similar to Tone Broke last year, if the performance is good enough, maybe top 4 finish, this one will go over to 40. He just has that dirt experience and broke the maiden at Churchill on the dirt. I thought the price at 5-1, if I can get anywhere near, that'll be exciting. But it's interesting. If I had to pick a price horse, I like one of the fillies, and I like the 2, Merveilleux. I really think she could get a good trip, depending what the pace is. And this is a race I talked a little bit about with some people yesterday. I'm not sure how the pace is going to unfold. I don't think it's going to be slow. I don't think it's going to be wickedly quick. I think it'll be an honest pace, but it'll be interesting because there's a couple horses in here that I think if they made the lead, they could be kind of dangerous. I don't think they're going to let anyone walk, and we've seen that in the past. So I'm really excited about the Queen's Plate, and kind of looking at the other races. I really focused on just the stakes races, but the Bison City is always a great race to watch too, kind of thinking of after the Woodbine Oaks, a lot of the horses go into this spot, the fillies, and A Fleet Catherine looks extremely tough. I'm not going to lie, but we always talk about exotics. You and I either talk about pick 4s and pick 5s, or who we playing in a try or a super. Because when we talked about Derby, we talked about Max Player. Like, would you use them underneath? In this case, I think the filly that I would use underneath at a price is Roger Atfield horse, Gun Society. I'd like to use her on third on a couple of tries because I think she got some confidence back last time out when she finished second in the Eternal Search. And for me, that was a huge step up from her other 2 performances. And I love seeing 10-1 morning line. So she's kind of my sleeper. But I've just skimmed over the other races, and I haven't made a lot of conclusions yet. And a big reason is there's a lot of maiden races on the card, which is going to really shake things up, and maybe it'll turn into some good payouts and exotics, and even in the multi-race sequence, because you never know what's going to happen there.
That is the hope. Get some interesting stuff in. And we have a whole show with Clocker Ernie Perry going through, and Doug McPherson. They had some interesting thoughts on some of those maiden races, some price horses to maybe include in the mix. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the show and being a regular for us on the In the Money Network. We hope to have you back on again soon, and wish you Godspeed this weekend.
Thanks, Pete. Good luck.